10 years ago, I was having a hard time. I was burnt out. I was age 37. I had just had my annual income cut by 1/3. I was dealing with the lows of bipolar depression and seasonal affective disorder, or seasonal depression. On top of all that, I had a baby boy who was born in September of 2014. We found out on his second day of life that he had to have open heart surgery. So for me, it was, and my family, we were really kind of having a hard time. And by January of 2015, the winter seemed like it had just been too long. Cloudy, dreary days, endless Tennessee winter rainfall. I was craving sunshine. I was craving what I had as a child, which is access to nature anytime I needed it because I grew up in the country. I was craving being out, roaming through fields and pastures and creeks. But importantly, notice I didn't say forest. Because on that moment of my life, I needed something that a forest couldn't give me. I needed sunshine. But I'm also a botanist, and I need healthy, biodiverse landscapes. I didn't need a soccer field. I didn't need a greenway trail. I didn't need a playground. I needed biodiversity to help soothe my soul. So as I lay on the couch, watching my kids play around me on a Sunday, I thought, man, you got to get up. You got to go and be with your kids and play with your kids. So I literally peeled myself up off the couch. And I said, kids, why don't y'all come over to the kitchen table with me? And why don't we sit down and do a little bit of coloring? There's nothing to soothe your mind and your soul like that. And my kids gathered around and we sat down at the kitchen table and got out the crayons and I just started sketching away. And in that moment, I looked out through the back window and the sun came down for the first time in what seemed like weeks. And as I sat there, I sort of broke into daddy professor mode. I've been a professor at Austin Peay for 17 years now. And I said, girls, do y'all realize that our backyard here in northern Clarksville used to be a tall grass prairie? Really, Daddy? Yeah, absolutely. We live in one of those neighborhoods. There's like 1,000 homes and everybody's got a half-acre yard and there's privacy fences everywhere. And I said, now just look out there beyond the privacy fence. Can you imagine that 220 years ago, there were buffalo grazing and wallowing, little baby buffalo calves. And there were greater prairie chickens back there too. And they were dancing and booming at dawn as they sounded their mating call. Really, Daddy? Yeah, absolutely. I channeled my inner Clark Griswold in that moment. And I sat down and we started coloring. And the bison and the prairie chickens, of course, have long ago since disappeared from this land. This is the crayon sketch that I developed on that day with my girls and my little boy there. And you can see this fanciful drawing of my wife and my little boy sitting on my lap and my two girls climbing one of the lone post oak trees out in the middle of these prairies. Just the beauty and the grandeur of that scene. A beautiful prairie sunset, wildflowers. Prairies are more than just grass. They're full of hundreds of species of native wildflowers, shrub thickets of flowering aromatic shrubs like wild crab apples and wild plums and hawthorns and hazelnuts. And every once in a while, a few scattered groves of trees. And they're not just one kind of prairie. There's 118 types of grasslands in the southeastern United States. Even within this one scene, there's dry prairie and wet prairie and mesic prairie. There's savannas and rocky, open rock outcrops. And there's even marshes and natural ponds. All this contributes to amazing amounts of biodiversity. But sadly, 99.99% of that prairie landscape is gone from northern Clarksville and Montgomery County. The famous ecologist from Harvard, E.O. Wilson, talked about what he called the southern grassland biome. And these areas in green show the parts of the southeastern United States which were open and grassy at the time the first Europeans came to our shores. And what many people don't realize is that northern Clarksville is on the southern end of this big prairie belt. It was 220 miles wide and more than 30 to 40 miles across at its widest point. And my neighborhood was right there on the southern edge of it. Sadly, 99.99% of that particular prairie has been lost. So I channeled my inner Clark Griswold and I said, family, why don't we take a road trip? Let's go up to the nearest accessible prairie to us on this cold January day. I felt myself coming back to life. And so we hopped in the car in about 15 minutes and we were on our way. We had to drive into another state, 3 counties away, because here in Clarksville, we didn't have what my soul needed on that day. And so as we drove across what's called the Pennyroyal Plain up through Guthrie, Kentucky and into southern Kentucky, endless cornfields and soybean fields and pastures and residential areas and corporate landscapes, but not a stitch of prairie remains. Nothing after 200 years. So my family and I, we get to Baker Prairie Natural Area near the Walmart in Russellville. And we get out and my 2 little girls are bounding through that tall golden grass. And you could just see the life coming back into me as I stepped into that scene. And even though it was in the 40s, temperature-wise, it felt warmer. We were being embraced by the sun, and my troubled mind was soothed. And I began to cuss the fact that we didn't have this back in my hometown. And I looked at my family as we were walking through that prairie, and I said, you know what? Daddy's going to build you prairies back in our hometown. And my wife says, how are you going to do that? I said, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. But what's true is I lacked the 4 key ingredients needed to make it happen. I didn't have any seeds. I didn't have any land. I didn't have a team. And one of the most important parts of all is I needed the ability, the knowledge to be able to restore these prairies. I didn't really have that. But I didn't let that set me back. One of the advantages, the superpowers of having bipolar disorder is an incredible, unending work ethic. The ability to work 30, 35 hours straight sometimes. And I put that superpower to good use. Within a couple of days, I called a good friend of mine who owns one of the leading native prairie seed producing companies in the eastern United States. Up near Mammoth Cave National Park, I called Randy and John Seymour. I said, guys, I got a big vision. I want to create a prairie back in our hometown that can soothe people's soul and be a place of respite for people in need, and biodiversity too. They said, we love everything you just said. We're going to give you everything you need to rebuild a prairie in your hometown. We'll give you all the seed. We're going to come and plant it, and you can call us anytime when you need guidance, and we'll walk you through it. I was very grateful for that. The value of that donation is around $35,000. Well, what about that land? Well, that is another problem that had to be overcome. And within a couple of days, I said, I got another idea. I think I'll call my friends at Tennessee State Parks. You know, there's a park right in the middle of our hometown called Dunbar Cave State Park. So I made a call, and one thing led to another, and sure enough, they said, you know what, we're actually just about to buy a 15-acre hayfield and add it to the state park. Yeah, we're going to close on it in like 2 months. We all met on scene. We agreed that 15-acre hayfield was just what we needed. It was perfect. And to add to this, the ranger, David Britton at Dunbar Cave, is a very well-known local historian. And he says, do you realize that Old Russellville Pike, which forms the western edge of your future planned prairie, it hasn't always been called Old Russellville Pike. In 1787, the historical literature points to the fact that it was called Dunbar's Buffalo Path. And the bison would come down out of the great prairies near the Kentucky-Tennessee state line, where the horizon of this photo is. And they would go and drink water from the mouth of a cave they called Buffalo Spring, we know today as Dunbar Cave. It was perfect. So now we had a historical precedent. We could add the facts of American history to our emerging story. I called up my best friend and a fellow botanist from Arkansas, Theo Witzel, and I said, hey man, we got to start telling the world about prairies. He said, I know. He said, you know, here in Arkansas, we're seeing the same thing. Our native wildflowers are disappearing. We're losing bobwhite quail. We're losing all these species because they don't need forests. They need open, healthy ecosystems, wild ecosystems. I said, well, let's do something about it. Why don't we host a symposium at Austin Peay State University? We'll call it the Mid-South Prairie Symposium. Sure enough, the following May of 2016, we held it. 150 people came. We had a 3-day event, 33 invited speakers. And you know the last person who registered for that event was a philanthropist from New York City. He came all the way down to attend this event. And afterwards, he wrote to us and he said, "My goodness, guys." He said, "Our family has been investing in the conservation of the savannas of Kenya for decades. And what you have just opened our eyes to is that we have our own American Serengeti right here in the eastern United States. What I'd like to know is what role can private philanthropy play in your mission to restore southern grasslands?" I said, "Philanthropy, what does that mean?" Oh my gosh, he wants to give us money. Can you believe that, Theo? One thing led to another. They issued us a $20,000 planning grant. And they said, quote, "Dream big, guys. Think programmatically." With that, that's all we needed. We began to form a vision for creating an organization. We sensed a complete void in a conservation organization whose sole focus was on rebuilding the forgotten grasslands of the South. So we built Southeastern Grasslands Institute right here out of Austin Peay State University. With that was the key foundational step to building the team. Then, on a Wednesday night in October of 2017, my, how time flies, a full year later, we'd been building that organization, speaking to anybody and everybody who would listen. We've gone on to speak to 100,000 people live, face to face. We built a website, we created a video, we hit social media, and we got on this endless train of writing grant proposals. So one night I couldn't write in my little 1,100 square foot house with 3 kids. So I told my wife, I said, I'm gonna go park over here in the industrial park. There's an oak tree that overlooks a creek valley. I think Google just bought that land. She said, okay. So I get over there, and at Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, my phone rings. Hello? Hi, this is Google. Listen, we'd like to invite you to submit a grant proposal to our organization because we've just heard about your prairie initiative from your university president. And I thought they were going to call me to tell me to get off of their land. It couldn't have been more perfect. So with all that, we had those basic building blocks in place. It took us a couple years, but we did it. So what does it look like to rebuild a prairie? Well, here at Dunbar Cave, we have to first go in and see what's already there. To a lot of people, they couldn't tell the difference between that hayfield and an actual native wild prairie. But sadly, the grass that you see there has been brought in from Europe and Asia, and it's not native here. And because of that, it has the wrong structure. Bobwhite quail can't thrive there. The pollinators aren't there because there's not enough wildflowers. The whole system is off and out of whack. So after we go in with teams of students and botanists to assess what's currently there, we have to start over. And that's what we did. But what do we know to go back to? Well, that's where we seek out reference sites, like some of the prairies at Fort Campbell Army Base. That's where the last remaining 1% of our grasslands are, thanks to the U.S. Army. There's 25,000 acres of prairies and savannas on base. Beautiful, rich, wild ecosystems, much like they were 250 years ago. So we study those, and we use those ecosystems to determine how we should rebuild these lost landscapes. We study the species, and we say, this is what we need for wet prairie, and for dry prairie, and for oak savanna, and the shrub thickets. That serves as our guide. That then, in turn, helps us to determine which species we need seeds of to restore these lost ecosystems. Now, all the while, we're having to get that site ready because it doesn't already have what's needed. So my son Boone and I are in the tractor here trying to do everything to learn all the processes. We had to spend 2 full years, 2015 and 2016, of getting this site just ready to be planted. And finally, in June of 2017, the day came. We put seed in the ground. It was a cool experience. Then the prairie goes through phases, 3. First, it sleeps, then it creeps, and in year 3, it leaps. And those 2 first years are really critical because the prairie plants are investing all their energy into the below ground where they can be strong. And it isn't until year 3 that they send up all that diversity and all that plant matter, the grasses fill in, the wildflowers fill in. That's when the bees start coming back. That's when the grassland birds start arriving. That's when the small mammals come back in larger numbers. And we designed this intentionally, again, to mirror those grasslands at Fort Campbell. Now, in the early days, we had no staff. So my children and my wife were all the support I needed. But gradually, we changed that. And people have been a huge part of what we do all along. We started bringing in other professors from the university and graduate students, and our growing staff, which started as a team of 2, we started partnering with other organizations and agencies like Mississippi State University and the University of Georgia to help document the insects, the grassland birds, and the mammals. We found the rare meadow jumping mouse in Google Prairie. And we use wildlife cameras to document. We've even got river otters coming into our prairie at Google Prairie. We've got bobcats and coyotes with pups. It's pretty cool. What I learned is that there's not enough money in this world to hire enough staff to do all this work. We must have people be part of this process. Now, think about prairies and how they came into being in the first place. They're adapted to fire, burning them occasionally. They're adapted to buffalo and elk, grazing them. And they had 10,000 to 12,000 years of Native Americans managing these landscapes. We took all that away. So if we want healthy grassland ecosystems, we must acknowledge that people are part of the solution. Prairies are places where children should go into and be encouraged to go play. So this is one of our volunteer days here in the community. On the right, you can see a group of elders who are preparing a site to be hand-sown with native seed that we have painstakingly collected from across the land. But on the left are the children. And what are they doing? They're building and playing. They're building a grass thatch hut. And you can imagine, to the elders in the community, how invigorating it is to work alongside kids and have that experience. It's such an outdoor community building exercise. We're doing workforce development. We're training young men and women how to be excellent at wildland firefighting, at how to do prescribed burning, how to collect native seed. We're collecting hundreds of pounds of native seed per year at places like Fort Campbell and other local remnant grasslands. We mix those up at our headquarters just a block or 2 away, and then those go back out in the wintertime before a snow or a winter rain. We work with all kinds. The football team comes out from Ostepee and some of our volunteers. Mrs. Licari, the wife of the university president. We teach people how to carefully and appropriately use herbicides to treat the invasive species that need to be eradicated or controlled. We do it through the summer or in the winter. It's a great cure for the winter blues. In our first 5 years, we only tackled about 75 total acres. That doesn't sound like much when we've lost 99% of our grasslands. But we're dreaming big and we're scaling up. In the last 3 years, we now have approached 1,000 acres that we're restoring. 500 acres 20 miles east of town, 350 acres just west of town across from Fort Campbell, 24 acres at Exit 1 with the Tennessee Department of Transportation. We bought 7 acres in the little small town of Guthrie to open up as a new community park. We've got 110 acres with Google Prairie, 15 acres at Dunbar Cave, and growing. And to quote the old film from 1989, A Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. Not only will the species come back, the people will be part of it, but others want to get in on the action. This last year, the U.S. National Park Service said, will you work with us for a good $11 million to restore grasslands across 40 U.S. national parks from Vermont to Mississippi? Iconic American landscapes used to have grasslands too, like Gettysburg Battlefield, Cades Cove, and Great Smoky Mountains National Park. We're doing this work. We're leading that out of this town. And so I'll close with a vision. We're just getting started. There's no need to take a nostalgic look back, and sure, I miss what we've lost. Most of you have probably heard of Rossview High School. It's named for the Ross family. And one of the best descriptions of the prairies that we have comes from the elder Reuben Ross, 1812. I want you to close your eyes and hear these words, because this is what we're about to rebuild not only here, but in towns and cities and rural areas across this land. It would be difficult to imagine anything more beautiful. For as far as the eye could reach, they seemed one vast, deep green meadow, adorned with countless numbers of bright flowers springing up in all directions. Only a few clumps of trees now and then were to be seen. It was here that the wild strawberries grew in such profusion as to stain the horses' hooves a deep red color. With children and retirees and burnout parents and researchers and students, young people in need of work, we can rebuild the American landscape, and you can join us. Thank you.